brilliance was it was this incredible control of and understanding of the craft of cinema. And for myself, there was a time when that was rather unfashionable, that you should forget craft. Well, I always liked the craft of cinema, and I think that if I could end up, knowing 1/10 of what he knew, then maybe I'll be okay.
He'd worked his films out, before he got anywhere near the studio. He knew every shot he was going to make.
He could put together a series of images that would grab you by the throat the moment you saw them, and he wouldn't let you go.
On the 100th anniversary of his birth, Hitchcock is still one of the world's favourite directors, admired by moviegoers and movie makers alike. This year, his unique style of filmmaking, tantalisingly charged with suspense, is being celebrated worldwide. But what made his film so special?
Anticipation is actually where pure drama is, and actually that's what holds you and involves you as an audience. I think that it's unfashionable to say that he was a master of manipulation, but he was.
That's only because one's challenged by the audience. They're saying to me, show us. And I know what's coming next. And I say, do you? And therefore that's the avoidance of the cliche, automatically. They're expecting the cliche. And I have to say, we cannot have a cliche here.
Making over 50 films throughout his career, Hitch developed a set of techniques and a style of direction that blended together created a very personal form of storytelling.
The way in which suspense plugged into what his personality was that he liked to be in control of everything, of situations, of the world in which he lived, and he loved to be in control of audiences. And suspense is obviously one of the best vehicles for that, because as he saw it, you put people through it. They came in, they sat down, and then you took them on a journey and you were in control. He liked the idea of manipulating an audience almost to the extent of being able to press a button and making them react. And the idea that an audience in Japan will react in exactly the way that he wants them to, in the same way as an audience in India or New York or Berlin, something that gave him an immense sense of power, I think, in the sense of being, as I say, in control of the world around him.
This fright complex is rooted in every individual.
All of us have individual fears, particular things that frighten us personally, but all suspense films have to play on the psychology of the mass audience. They have to pick on universal fears, because unless they do that, a film director can't guarantee that he's going to frighten a large number of people.
I believe in putting the horror in the mind of the audience and not necessarily on the screen.
Where Hitchcock was particularly good at manipulating his audience was he understood this first basic principle of fear, which is that it's your imagination, ultimately, which scares you much more than reality.
Suspense is the key to the enduring appeal of Hitchcock's films. It lies behind his ability to draw the audience into his stories and keep them hooked.
The heroes in Hitchcock are often in situations where they are made to seem like the guilty party, the people on the run, which I think appeals to people's own sense of guilt. The villains are often the plausible ones who seem to be completely in control of the situation. So he would make you identify by making you kind of slightly squirm in your seat, but you would recognise the situation, the feeling of guilt.
And I think that taps into some very deep childhood fears that we have, of often committing a small crime that we hope our parents haven't noticed.
But you see, the psychiatrist will always tell you, if you have a fear that is rooted in you and comes from something in your childhood, the moment you can go back to it and release it, all is well. It doesn't apply to me. I'm still scared of policemen.
Really what suspense films are doing is they're taking the evil that's in all of us and splitting it off from us and separating it from us and then showing it to us. Because there's a sense in which, for us to be so affected by evil, it may well be the case that we have evil fantasies that are being portrayed.
Hitchcock favoured blonde heroines who were tormented or abused. He preferred them because they were, in his words, like virgin snow which shows up bloody footprints.
His explanation was that it's a tradition of cinema. If you go back to the days of the silent movies, it's the blonde tied to the railway tracks with the evil villain with the moustache.
But there are some arguments that this was showing his sadistic attitude to women.
He stayed with his missus forever, so he obviously loved her. So maybe it was just, that's how he got his jollies off, by having his fantasy with those blondes in his movies.
Hitchcock preferred working with well-known Hollywood stars that audiences were already familiar with.
When he first went to Hollywood, he had the chance to work with big stars, and he valued them because he knew that they brought the audiences in. Having cast his stars, having cast Cary Grant, say in an early film like Suspicion, he went completely against the perceived image of Cary Grant. He did the same with James Stewart. James Stewart, the most popular man on American screens, full of kind of wholehearted, wholesome American values. And in a film like Vertigo, he comes across as a kind of weird creep, very powerful and disturbing to see such a wholesome image, so the flip side of that. And that was something that Hitchcock was aware of in all kinds of situations. He believed that all of humanity has this dark side.
The satisfaction of temporary pain. And that's the same thing when people endure the agonies of a suspense film. When it's all over, they're relieved.
Fear has several different phases, and perhaps the first phase and the most important phase is the one of anticipation. Because in all suspense films, there's a long period, a long build-up of suspense. We're allowing our imagination to wreak havoc with us, allowing us to get more and more scared. When the frightening thing actually happens, the scene of the frightening thing is usually very fast. If you think of the classic shower scene in Psycho, the scene doesn't last very long. Because if it lasted for a very long period of time, our fear would begin to go away.
Life is a big mystery, isn't it? It always has been. I think people are intrigued by mystery to find out about things they don't know anything about.
The most frightening things can happen in the most ordinary places, as in North by Northwest, the great crop duster sequence. And the whole motive for that famous, justly famous scene was that you'd take your hero and you'd put him in a place that was completely empty, where there was no possibility of any danger whatsoever, because there was nothing around you to threaten you. And from out of that, you would then conjure all kinds of dangers, notably the crop dusting plane. And that's why ordinary places become places of great fear and suspense.
That is the kind of ultimate neurosis, where you never feel safe wherever you are. And Hitchcock is very good at that.
The MacGuffin was a device Hitchcock always used to set his plots in motion, but it was only a meaningless red herring.
By the way, am I allowed to know your name?
Smith?
I don't care about content at all. The film can be about anything you like, so long as I'm making that audience react in a certain way to whatever I put on the screen.
He would often, when he was shooting, set himself technical challenges about the way that you shot things. There are loads of instances of this. Rear Window, for example, shot more or less all from the perspective of someone in a wheelchair. For Hitchcock, it was a way of making the shooting interesting and showing people that he could do it.
So what is the secret of Hitchcock's enduring popularity as the undisputed master of suspense?
Audiences love him because he gives value for money. You sit down and watch a Hitchcock film, even the worst Hitchcock films, and there are some, have great moments in them, and the greatest films are just a fantastic ride from beginning to end. And more than that, they always have this other element, this weird atmosphere, this darker side, wherever that came from, which they make them enduring works of art rather than just entertainment.
But you have to remember that this process of frightening is done by means of a given medium. The medium of pure cinema is what I believe in. The assembly of pieces of film to create fright is the essential part of my job.
So now you know how Hitch took us all on a white knuckle ride.